Hello everyone. Let's take a look at exercise 331, which deals with basic manufacturing cost flows. And now we're concerning ourselves with the Lone Star Leather Company, and we have some information regarding inventory cost at the beginning and end of the period, broken out by raw materials, work in process, and finished goods. And we have some other costs as well. Direct material used during the past year was $652,000, and the total manufacturing cost charged to production during the year, which would include direct material, labor, and overhead, is $1,372,000. So that's $1,372,000. And keep in mind that the manufacturing overhead gets applied at a rate of 60% of the direct labor costs. The problem also tells us that the cost of goods available for sale was $1,652,000, and selling and administrative expenses were $63,000, and we're asked to solve four requirements. So let's tackle the first one, which was what was the cost of raw materials purchased for the year. Okay, so let's do number one. Well, how do we determine it? I like to use a very simple formula, right? Beginning inventory plus purchases equals goods available, but I'm going to leave that off, and then we're going to say just deduct, or less, if you will, raw materials used, right? And this is how we would calculate the cost of materials purchased during the year, would equal ending inventory. This is all of raw materials, so why don't we say that? Ending raw materials inventory, okay? And we'll change that to beginning raw materials inventory. Okay, so let's put our numbers in. Well, we know the beginning is $142,000. It's given in the first number, the table above. Again, let me format some of these so that it's all in comma with no decimal places. The purchases we don't know. The raw material used is the 652, direct material used. I'm using the terms raw material and direct materials interchangeably. So we'll put 652,000 in there, right? And the ending inventory is 162 right to the left of my mouths. Okay, well, if we know the beginning, and we know there must be some amount less the ending equals 162, all we have to do is solve for the missing amount. So we essentially could say that this is A plus B, right, less C equals D. So if we use math to solve for that, then we can solve for B, right? So we're going to say that D is equal to A plus B minus C. Okay, now let's put in what we do know. 162,000 is equal to 142,000, right? Plus an unknown minus 652, right? And then we just rearrange the terms. So why don't we say 142,000 would be equal to 652,000 minus 162,000 plus B. So once we have that, we know then we could just solve for B. And B is going to be equal to 672,000. Okay, now let's make sure that really works. We'll plug in the 672,000 and see. We'll erase the 162. We know that's what we have to. Well, here, why don't I do it this way? Let's see if this all equals out. That should equal that, plus that, minus that. Right? And it does. So we know the answer is the 672. And this column just served as a proof. Okay, that's number 1. Let me slide down and we'll work on solving number 2. Number 2 says, what was the direct labor cost charged to production during the year? Okay, let's slide down so we give ourselves some room. Okay. Well, we know that the total manufacturing cost was $1,372,000, right? Let's write that down. And we know that of that direct material, I'm going to put it this way, less direct material was equal to the 652, because they give that in the problem. So what that tells us is what's left is direct labor and manufacturing overhead. So if we take the 1372, the 1,372 less the 652,000, we know we've got 720,000. Now, what does that 720,000 represent? It represents direct labor and manufacturing overhead, and we know that direct labor represents 60%. Let me say that another way. Manufacturing overhead represents 60% of direct labor. So we know that that 720 really is equal to 160% of direct labor, right? Oh, give me an error because I put an equal sign, so let me turn it into a text string. So to solve for that, what we have to do, determine the direct labor, set direct labor equal to the 720 divided by 160%, or 1.6. Now you could enter it as 160% or 1.6. Both will give you the same answer. So we'll enter in Excel 160%. And what that tells us is that's our answer for direct labor. Now, to prove that, we could take the 450,000 times the 1.6 would be the 60% overhead, and the 100% represents the direct labor, and equals the 720. So there's a proof that we did that correctly. Okay, let's go on and answer the third requirement. What was the cost of goods manufactured during the year? Let's slide down and I'll work on that. Well, we need to compute the schedule of cost of goods manufactured. Let's start off with the WIP. That's work in process, okay, sometimes called WIP, inventory beginning. And we know that the beginning was 160,000. Oh, let me slide this over. We get a little bit more room to work. Okay. Now, then we have to add in total manufacturing costs, right? And the total manufacturing costs were already given to us above of 1,372, right? What does that give us? Gives us? Well, that gives us the total cost to account for. But then, rather than creating a subtotal there, let's deduct the cost of goods manufactured. This is how we would compute it. Now, we don't know that. That's what we're trying to solve. And the end of that would get us work in process for ending inventory. Okay? I'm going to solve this one sort of like we did on part A. And we know the work in process and ending inventory is 60,000, right? So again, if we know that we have, let me slide this a little bit over here. Give us a bit more room. I'm going to slide this over. All right. So, and to make this even less, I'm just going to abbreviate. Again, what we have is A plus B, right, minus C. And again, it doesn't like it because I need to enter it as a text, equals D, right? Okay. So again, if D equals A plus B minus C, and we should be able to algebraically solve it. Now, rather than go through the detail like we did in Part A, the approach is exactly the same. So why don't I just put in the right amount, which, if you do the math, will equal 1472000. And to prove it, again, we'll say this cell has to be equal to that cell plus that cell less that cell. Plug in those numbers. If we equal $60,000, which we do. Now you can't see it real well, so I'll widen that a little bit. Okay. And given that that's the case, we're trying to solve for the 1472, and that's the answer to Part 3. Okay, now let's answer the fourth one. What was the cost of goods sold during the year? Well, cost of goods sold is much the same approach. This time we're talking about finished goods. What was in beginning inventory? I'm going to abbreviate a little bit here. We're going to add cost of goods manufactured. Then we would deduct the cost of goods sold, right? Which is the next step, if you will. Cost of goods in the production process. After we've manufactured it, we sell it. And that would derive the finished goods in ending inventory. Same approach, right? So why don't I just copy all of this here, and then we'll plug the information in, solving which one we're trying to solve for. All right, finished goods beginning is 180,000. We'll erase this for now. Oh, I need an extra 0. Cost of goods manufactured, we've already determined, is 1472 from above, right? The cost of goods sold is what we need to solve for, and the ending finished goods is 220,000. Okay, so again, algebraically, we can say D is equal to A plus B minus C. Rearrange the terms, and you will solve for C. And since we've done that on Part 1, I'm not going to do it again. But I know the answer is 1432000. Now, let's check and make sure that's the case. What I will do is copy these over, right? And then copy that formula, which is adding above cells takes A plus B less what's in C, which is the cost of goods, and it should equal to 220. And since those two numbers are the same, I know we've solved it correctly. This is our nice proof, as this is our nice proof. And we have now completed exercise